It happened much later than you would think. I started on the violin when I was maybe 5. That didn't go very well. I switched to the clarinet at age 7. And I think like maybe many young musicians, it starts as an additional homework for many. Um, I went to an evening school twice a week for my clarinet lessons. And I think somehow maybe when I was 8 or 9, I was playing with the National Youth Syrian Symphony. And I'm mentioning this because it was during a rehearsal with that orchestra where I think I finally fell in love with the instrument. It was for the first time that I was moved by what I was playing. And I think, the rest is history, really. That was a key moment for me to understand the impact of what I was producing on my emotional being. But, it's a love story that lasted until today. And now I think the clarinet became my first and foremost mode of expressing myself. I'm by far better player than a talker, that's for sure. Uh, but yeah, and I mean the clarinet, but also music in general, happened from a young age. I grew up in a household that valued everything cultural, and my parents play musical instruments on an amateur level, and my sister also did. So I fell in love with music, I think, before falling in love with the instrument.
Was it
Yeah,
mostly classical music or all kinds of music?
it was all kinds of music. My dad loves classical music, Western classical music. My mom loves Arabic music. I mean, this is when I was growing up. I think now they both love everything. But my education was in Western classical music. I grew up playing Bach, Brahms, Beethoven, and Mozart. But when you go in the streets in Damascus, you hear Arabic music, you hear Kurdish music, you hear Armenian music. So I grew up in a big collage of musical explorations, if you want, and uh, and what I ended up being interested in reflected this early exposure to all these different kinds of music. But from an educational perspective, I was taught how to play in a Western uh, way.
And who were some of your early favorite composers?
Of course, there's Mozart, who's everybody's favorite. But I clearly remember when my parents, after a trip to Hungary, they brought with them scores, but also recordings of Hungarian music and music by Bela Bartok specifically. And for me, as you know, maybe I was 11 at the time or 12, when I was playing these Bartok Romanian dances, for example, one of the most famous pieces by Bartok, it was as if somebody opened a window in my brain as a child and experience like I was able to experience a total different world. And I played these pieces, and I played with these pieces also, over the years by improvising on these pieces, playing them in different formations. So Bartok continues to be a great inspiration. I love Penderecki, the Polish late composer, but I don't have a favorite. I do think of music as a continuum, and I love music across genres, across generations, across different eras. Um, yeah, but Bartok maybe continues to be one of the most influential in my life.
Beautiful, wonderful. And this is a really hard question because there are so many great musicians, but do you have a couple favorites from the past and present who you love who play clarinet like you?
When you think about the clarinet world, Benny Goodman is an incredible inspiration for many. He changed the clarinet world. I don't know if you know, but many composers wrote pieces for him, including Bartok, including Poulenc, including Hindemith. Also, he was somebody who lived between genres. He's not only the classical clarinetist, he's not only the jazz clarinetist. He's somebody who transcended the instrument really, and so he communicated with the world with the clarinet. And I love this idea of using the instrument only as a tool. So certainly, Benny Goodman is on the top of the list. But also, I'm like always inspired by the current word of clarinetists today. People who are playing and contributing to the genre and the instrument. And the list is way too long to mention it on this program. But Benny Goodman continues to be like an icon for me. And also another guy, maybe he's lesser known, is called Erno Kalaikish, who's a gypsy clarinet player from Hungary. Also, I listened to his recordings when I was young, and also it changed my life. Another person that I also admire is a Turkish clarinetist who passed away also a few years ago. His name is Selim Sesler. I mean, all these people, I continue to be learning from all their like wonderful recordings.
Does each musician play the clarinet a little bit differently? Can you detect differences in
Oh,
in
absolutely.
style or approach?
Absolutely. I think there are two things one can think about. There's, of course, the musical vocabularies that are used in a specific geographical place, Like if you listen a clarinetist playing in the New Orleans jazz style, it's very different from bebop, it's very different from Turkish clarinet playing or Armenian clarinet playing or Hungarian clarinet playing. But even when you listen to players from that same geographical location, I think that's what's most exciting about making music is it's incredibly personal. When you play an instrument, whether it's the violin, the clarinet, any instrument really, for that matter, the personal connection is the most important, at least for me. And you can hear, I mean, of course, you have to immerse yourself into the sounds of many people to be able to recognize the individual voices that people bring. But the clarinet as a wind instrument, where you put the instrument in your mouth, it becomes an extension of your body, but just by default. And breath is part of it. So I think you can immediately identify almost the breath of the performer, not only the sound the performer is making. And of course, now, I mean, this is what I do for a living, really, as a clarinetist, and I can tell like who's playing what from just the first few notes because I spend my life listening to these people.
Wow. And how do you know when to take a breath?
uh, that's a wonderful question. Like now, if you do this exercise, or if your listeners can do this exercise, the moment you are aware of your breath, it becomes an obstacle in a way. Like you hyperventilate suddenly, and like I don't know when to do it. The moment you forget about it, then that's when it works. And I think playing the clarinet is very, very similar. I simply don't think about it. I just play. When I need to breathe, I breathe. Um, and I like, back to talking about the clarinet sound. I like clarinet sounds where you can hear the air, the sound. It's a wind instrument, so it's naturally to hear the wind element of it, and also the breathing of the person who's playing the instrument. So, I mean, all of this to say, I don't think about it much at this stage. For me, the closer playing is to how we live our lives naturally, the better performer you can be. Where it doesn't seem like you have to borrow like some other techniques from something else. It's just you play the way you live, really.
That's very interesting. When did you start composing?
I started fooling around with composition at a young age. I was encouraged by my parents uh, to try to write stuff. So the first little piece of music, it was maybe only 4 bars of music, was composed when I was maybe 8 or 9 years old. And then I was interested in other stuff, so I started to improvise, which is maybe the other side of the coin of composition. But then composition took a more serious turn for me, in early 2000 when I started to write for my jazz quartet, well, Arabic jazz quartet for lack of better term. And it was in the form of lead sheets. But then composition, I mean, those of you who are listening who are composers might relate to this. It's a very addictive thing to do. You're enjoying an incredible amount of freedom. You can express fully what you want to express. in the most abstract way, which is to write something on a, with the paper and pen. So after I started writing sketches for my jazz quartet, naturally I wanted to start to write for orchestras, and I got commissioned. My first serious commission was in 2009. I was commissioned to write a piece for a full symphony orchestra, clarinet and voice, for a festival in Germany called the Morgenland Festival in Osnabrück, and then suddenly I became the composer, and I started to get commissions to write more pieces, and so it was a sudden thing, though it was in the back of my mind for since I started learning music. I was encouraged again by my parents to not only be a one-sided musician, but more of a whole musician.
Can you tell me about the composition, the fence, the rooftop, and what is it? The what sea?
And the distancy.
Yeah, tell me about how that came about and also the title. It's a crazy great title.
Absolutely. So the fence, the rooftop, and the distant sea was written in 2017. I was commissioned by the Ed Philharmony, which is this wonderful concert hall in Hamburg, for its opening season to write a piece for myself and the wonderful, inspiring Yo-Yo Ma. So it's a piece for clarinet and cello. And it was a time, so the piece was written in a time that I have not been back in Damascus for almost 6 years. And it was a time where I was starting to worry about forgetting how my home's landscape looked like. So every time I will go and I see another friend, another Syrian friend elsewhere, we will do this mental exercises by doing some imaginary drives from point A to point B in Damascus to try to remember which exit do we take to go from my parents' place to the opera house, for example. Where do we park? What existed there? Is there like an ice cream shop nearby? We're trying to recreate home in our brains. And the piece is about that. The piece is two individuals, the cello and the clarinet, trying to recreate home from their kind of scattered memories. So sometimes they go into like some kind of monologue. Sometimes they converse, they dispute things. Sometimes they dance together over a good memory. And then by the fifth movement, they realize that the most important memories from home were the simplest, such as remembering how to drive from point A to point B without having to look at a map or something. And I wrote this piece in Beirut. My wife is Lebanese, and I was visiting her. We were visiting my in-laws, and we rented an apartment that in Beirut that had a beautiful terrace. There's like a rooftop. There was a fence, and in the distance you can see the Mediterranean. And the apartment was pointing north, so you can almost imagine seeing the Syrian coastline, even though it wasn't there. It's further north. But the idea of the piece was how close home felt, but how far it was, or the other way around. So it's an homage to home, to the idea of home, and how one can be proactive in recreating home. And that's the title. So here it is: the fence, the rooftop, and the distant sea.
Okay, the next part is about collaboration and expansion. So I wondered if you could please explain the origins, and I don't know if I'm saying this right, of your group called Hewar?
Yeah,
Hewar?
Hiwar,
Hewar.
that's right. Yeah.
Okay, tell me about that, please.
Hiwar was the band I mentioned to you when I started writing. It was a sextet. At the heart of it, there's a trio, actually friends from childhood: Dima Orsho, singer, and Isam Rafi on oud. And the whole idea was, how can you bring people with seemingly contrasting musical upbringings or vocabularies, and you just allow them to communicate using their instruments. Hiwar, the word hiwar in Arabic means dialogue. So that's the whole premise of the project. It was mostly improvised music. Sometimes we'll bring some kind of lead sheets to work with, but it was a great way to experiment. I come from a mostly classical, Western classical music background. Isam, the oud player, is from a very solid Arabic music background, and Dima Osho, the singer, is from like the opera world. And we met because we wanted just to explore different things. And it was a band that I created in Damascus after I moved to the US. I think it was one of these attempts of not losing touch with home. I moved to New York in 2001, and the group was created in 2003. So I think it was, now looking at it retrospectively, it was all about holding on to something and not letting it go.
And how often do you get to play with that group?
It Hiwar took different turns over the years. Like for example, in Songs for Days to Come, in the opera that I premiered in Germany a couple of years ago, Dima, the singer, was the main character of the opera, and Isam, the oud player, was actually a core member of the orchestra of that production. So we collaborate on and off. It's not a band that tours, um, 100 concerts a year or so, but we collaborate. We constantly collaborate on much bigger projects now. But it's unlike my my New York quartet, the Kinan Azmeh City Band, with whom I have toured the whole world in the last few years, and we continue to tour, and we're releasing a new album. Um, but both Hiwar and the Kinan Azmeh City Band, my two main band projects, are both projects that I think I've dug vertically to get to. They are all very old friendships and old collaborations. Uh, they're basically my family away from my family. Both of these projects.
Ooh, sounds wonderful. Is there a certain song that you would recommend that I play on my show this week?
From Hiwar, there's a track called Ink, which I love. INK. It's from the album called Hiwar, and the band is Hiwar, and
And
it's all on YouTube and on like all the the music streaming services. It's there.
did you compose that one?
Yes.
Beautiful, beautiful. That sounds great. How about City Band? How did you guys form and how many people are in that one?
We are four people: clarinet, guitar, bass, and drums. Josh Myers on bass, John Hatfield on drums, and Kyle Sana on guitar. Kyle will be joining us actually in Santa Fe for the concert, and I've been playing with this band now for almost 20 years, maybe a bit less. Kyle is maybe one of my earliest New York friends, and I remember I mean, the formation of the band actually is interesting because since I had a band in Damascus, I didn't want to have a band in New York. Just I thought, you have only one band. That was my brain 20 something years ago. But then I was in New York, and Kyle and I played a number of times, and there was this venue. It's like a little cafe in Soho, and I knew the owner, and the owner said, like, I'm doing a music festival. Would you like to come and play? He knew that I'm a musician, and I said, sure, I would love to play. He said, okay, would you like to bring your band? And I said yes without thinking, like, yes, I'll bring my band. And then after we finished, like, speaking on the phone, like, oh, I don't even have a band. So I called Kyle immediately. Kyle, would you like to play with me on this thing? And then we did a couple of rehearsals, and then I thought, maybe we need a drummer. And then Kyle introduced me to John, the drummer, and we did that show as a trio. And then after the show, we thought, like, you know what? Maybe it's good to have a bassist with us. So John, the drummer, introduced us to Josh, the bassist. So the band grew very organically. It's not like I auditioned people or anything, just like, okay, this is the band. And it's a philosophy that I use in all the work I do, all the collaborative work. I go where the love is. And this band, there's so much love going on, also with Hiwar, and also all my other collaborations. And that's why these collaborations, I think, last for many years, because there's so much love at the heart of what we do. And we released the first album was actually maybe 10 years ago, and then we decided not to release any albums because we just wanted to tour and play live. And now this album that is coming up in March is a live album we recorded in Berlin, called Live in Berlin. We recorded that at the Boulez Saal. And yeah, and also, the Kinan Azmeh City Band is my family, is my New York family, away from my family.
but you also have a long collaboration with Silk Road and Yo-Yo Ma
That's
and
right.
the Knights and Brooklyn Rider. So could you
Absolutely
talk a
correct.
little bit about how you came to know them and work with them?
Uh, this is one of the amazing things about New York. When I moved to New York, I was going to a great school, and and the city was always exciting for me. And what I didn't expect that the New York music scene is the one that I'm gonna be learning from the most. And when I talk about the New York music scene is when I met my band members Kyle, John, and Josh, but also where I met Colin and the Brooklyn Rider guys and the Knights and the Silk Road family and Yo-Yo and all these people. It just happened through really organic, natural connections. I didn't audition to any of these things. It happened that, oh, Kina, would you like to come and collaborate with us on this project and that, and it just happened. I knew many people from the Silk Road Ensemble, uh, like I said, from the New York music scene, and also there are lots of overlapping between the Knights, Silk Road, and Brooklyn Rider. 3 out of 4 players of Brooklyn Rider were member of Silk Road, and also some of them were members of the Knights Orchestra. So one thing led to another. It's like a dance of many, many, many dancers, and so yeah, with Brooklyn Rider, we recorded an album recently called Starlighter. We released it last year. And with Silk Road, I'm on 3 albums, 2 or 3 albums, I forgot now. And I'm still active with the ensemble, less so than before, just because my own personal projects also became busier and busier. And with the Knights, I just finished a tour in the summer with them, where Kyle, actually, you're gonna like this because you see how the connections happen. Kyle, the guitarist in my quartet, who's playing with us in Santa Fe, wrote a concerto for me to premiere with the Knights. So like it's a pool, like I'm surrounded by an incredible pool of collaborators, of generous collaborators. That's how I put it. People, sometimes I premiere a concerto written for me by somebody. Sometimes I'm writing a concerto for somebody to premiere, and often we collaborate on stage, on tour in the U.S., abroad. I can, like the fact that I'm telling you this loudly, I realize how lucky I am to be surrounded by all these wonderful people. So yeah, I'm totally blessed.
And you went to New York at the right time.
You know, uh, it's uh, it's it's interesting you say this because I moved to New York a week before 9/11 happened, and as an Arab in New York, it was not easy, and that was the time also when what they call the special registration thing happened, when you have to register when you exit the country. And every time I landed back in JFK coming from a tour, I'll be singled out for like 5 or 6 hours for additional questioning. I mean, all of this on the official level. However, I had this alternative loving system that I was surrounded with. So yeah, I mean, to answer your question, yes, maybe it was the right time. I don't know. I was like I felt loved all these years in New York and in the US at large. And all these collaborations that I have, which I know are for life, all grew from both my Damascus, my original home, New York, my current home, and everywhere in between. So yeah, I guess the right time combined with the right attitude also from my behalf, where I'm like, okay, I'm here. I wanna be as open as possible and see what comes my way, and embrace the thing that came my way.
And I read that you had trouble getting back into the country after Trump was elected. Can you tell me that story, please?
It's when I mentioned the piece, the fence, the rooftop, and the distant sea. We gave the premiere of that piece in 2017, 18 in Hamburg. Early, it was in January, And late January, right after that concert, I went to Beirut to play a concert, and that's when the infamous travel ban. I was aware of it, and I was stuck in Beirut for 3 4 days, just not knowing what to do until the judge from Seattle, lifted the travel ban. I was able to go back home. But also, it was a key moment for me to understand and to think more about the idea of home. I was in Beirut, worrying about what to do. And then I was, seeing in the news, but also people are writing to me, like all these people who went to JFK airport, for example, to demonstrate against that executive order. These are people who were not affected by the travel ban, yet they went in solidarity with people who were. It was very moving for me to see that, and it was maybe a way of understanding that, yeah, New York City is my home too.
What about I have to ask you about Yo-Yo Ma. He seems
Hmm.
like such a generous human being. Am I getting it right that he's that kind of person?
His yes, of course. I mean, he's a very generous and genuine person, and very honest. And I think these are three qualities in people that I think are incredibly amazing to have. And I didn't even start talking about his music making, you know. And the whole idea for me is somebody who can transcend the instrument, that the instrument is only a tool to communicate. For me, summarizes the whole idea of art. I mean, to be creative and to make meaningful art, you need an idea you want to share with the world. You need a tool, and in his case, is the cello, and you need the skills to use the tool to share the idea. And with him, you see it all the time. And every time you have a conversation with him, he's always fully present with you. When you make music with him, he's fully there all the time. And I mean, somebody at his level, not only musically, but at his stature, like in life, I mean, he is incredibly humble and down to earth. And he is a joker. He jokes around the whole time, and he doesn't take things too seriously. For him, making music is just one aspect of life, not all of life. And I love that.
That's neat. It must be amazing to play with someone new and just find that you really work well together. Is it a thrill?
It is a thrill, but also, sometimes you play with somebody and where all the factors for success, a successful conversation are there, and it simply doesn't work. I don't think it's different, Deborah, from like when I'm talking to you right now. Maybe this conversation can be meaningful, and maybe if we're two different people, maybe we will have nothing to say to each other, like, which is also fine. It's the individual, it's how. But when it happens, when you find yourself in a conversation that is exciting, it's similar to what happens in life. Musicians don't have it in a different way. We just happen to use instruments. Your listeners who are not musicians do that also in their lives all the time. You sit in a bar or a restaurant, have a conversation with a stranger. When the conversation like sparks, it's the most exciting thing. You come back home like super happy. But lots of the time we don't have the courage to do that in life. It's not like you go in the street to somebody like, hey, let's have a conversation. Musicians tend to do that. It's part of the job, is to jump into an unknown territory and, oh, yeah, let's play. I guess the instruments and the music as a language, as a universal language, functions as a kind of not a buffer zone, but kind of a friendly uh, context or friendly frame through which you can have a meaningful conversation. But yes, I mean, sorry, that's a very long answer to your question. It's super exciting when there's a musical chemistry that is totally working. And sometimes when I play with my bands, like we're playing, and even with people that like so well, you realize like, wow, this is super exciting, guys. And you can see that sometimes when I look at footage of my concerts with my quartet, and I know like this is a great musical moment. You can see that in the facial expressions of the players, where everybody's like surprised by what's going on. And these are moments that give me, like, fuel me for years, basically.
It sounds so rich. But then being a listener is pretty rich too.
Oh, absolutely. No, because we are listeners too. When we play, we are actually super active in listening. That's maybe the number one thing in the job description of being a musician. You have to be a good listener. Forget about your playing. You have to be a very good listener. And for us, we have the best seat in the house. Basically, when I'm playing with my quartet, I can listen to us the best. I'm in the middle of it, you know. But also, you see, I can tell when we are playing well and we're like there's a fire on stage. You see it immediately in the audience, because also the audience, everybody is very smart and they can pick up on what's going on immediately.
Wow, it's like a mysterious language, isn't it?
It is. It is.
I mean, to think that music is so universal. I mean, it and transcends borders and, you know.
Absolutely.
What's the story behind the title November 22nd, and could you please introduce that?
Absolutely. I moved to New York, like I said, in 2001. In 2006, I was invited for my first Thanksgiving dinner. And this wonderful family invited me to have Thanksgiving dinner with them somewhere outside of DC. And we had a wonderful meal, you know, way too many drinks, lots of food. And it was the first time that I felt at home away from home. And yeah, and it's a tricky feeling, you move to a new place and you want to feel at home, you want to assimilate and want to feel at home. The moment you feel at home in a new place, I think part of you feels guilty about it, like you feel bad for feeling good. I think I wondered, like, am I betraying my original home because I feel at home elsewhere? And the piece is inspired by that. Is inspired by this ambiguous feeling of feeling at home in a new place. And uh, and the piece, actually, I mean, to tell you the full story, so we had this wonderful dinner and then we went back to the hotel. The next morning they wanted to go to Black Friday. I had no idea what Black Friday was. So I remember telling them, like, you guys go ahead. I'm just gonna be at home in the hotel. And I wanted to write a piece to document how I felt. And I found myself remembering or recalling the sound of a market that used to exist behind my parents' place back in Damascus. I think that market had a rhythm to it, some kind of a pulse. And I think cities have pulse in general, which are unique to them. And so the piece is inspired by the pulse of Damascus, which is steady, and there's the clarinet on top of all of that, is trying to make sense of the different homes it inhabits. So, and the title actually came from the date it was written. So it was on November 22nd when the piece was composed.
And tell me if you agree with this. When a person moves geographically, you always gain something and you always lose a lot too, right? So home becomes very, it is a mixed bag, isn't it? When you move.
Absolutely, absolutely. The thing is, I cannot speak about moving really because I never felt I moved anywhere. To be honest, I came to study in the U.S. The plan was for me to do my master's and then go back to Damascus. That was my plan. But for the first bunch of years when I was in New York, for my master's, then my doctorate, and then of course New York sucked me in like it does to many people. I was, part of the music scene, and I wanted to stay. I was just enjoying it. Um, but it was never that I packed, and I never got like a one-way ticket, to leave Damascus. And for all these years, the first few years of me leaving, I made sure to go back to Damascus as often as I could to perform and to continue to be a local. I didn't want to become an expatriate. So until today, I still think of it's both Damascus and New York. These are my two big anchors in life. But also everywhere else. or everywhere I play is an extension of that home, you know? So I don't think about it as gaining or losing. It's a transformation during life, um, which is affected by the surrounding and by the choices we make. But also, a home or the idea of home is something that we carry, and we can, whether you're planting a tree somewhere or whether you're having a family somewhere. Uh, I mean, life is too short for us to think about it in terms of winning and losing. I think of everything as not a game, but as like time moves forward, and we're moving forward with it. And there's no point of just looking back. There's one point of looking back is when there's injustice somewhere that needs to be addressed, and that's when we should look back. But otherwise, uh, I keep looking straight ahead. And you know what? Actually, maybe there's some kind of parallel with that with music. When I play a piece, I cannot go back. If I make a mistake while I'm playing, there's no time. You have to keep going, and you're in the moment. You know where the piece is gonna end. You know what's ahead of you, but also you don't see what's ahead of you until the moment when you're playing that. It's a very in the moment kind of art form, which I love, and I'd like to lead my life in a similar fashion.
Oh, good for you. Wow.
I
You are
try. I
quite
try.
you are quite the philosopher. Okay, part 3, your life on the go.
All right.
I have a feeling that fits your, travel schedule.
That's right.
How do you balance performance, practice, and composition times? Do you take one
Um,
deadline at a time and not worry about
yeah,
what's coming
yeah,
up, or
yeah.
what?
I know I do. With performing, I know what needs to happen. Like basically, I'm learning a new piece. I need to like, I need to make that piece work. I need to learn it. I know I need, I look at the score. I know like I need 2 months to learn this piece, whether it's a piece by somebody else or it's a piece that I've written for myself. I know exactly what needs to happen, so I can pace that, according to my calendar, where I have the time to put these blocks of practice time. Uh, I practice anyway. It's like working out. I do that daily, no matter what. With composition, it's different because in composition, it's not like you don't have the luxury of sitting and waiting until you are inspired. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. Sometimes it does, which is great, and sometimes it's like you hit your head against the wall for a long time. So now what I do, I try to create a safe zone for myself with composition. I always carry with myself a notebook, and also the phones these days help a lot. And every time a musical idea or a musical device I call um, comes to my mind, I immediately put it in the book of ideas. And then this can be used later on when you need to write a piece. Um, but the balance is really dependent on what happens in my calendar. Like if I'm on tour for like 2 months straight, then there's no really room for to sit down with a notebook and a piano and to compose. So I don't do it. I just focus on what I'm touring with. Uh, with practicing is different because even when I'm composing something, I'm always able to sit down with the clarinet and practice. I mean, this was all great, a great balance until my son arrived to this world, and now balancing became much easier. Like basically, I have time to work between the time I drop him in daycare to the time that I bring him back from daycare, and you can fill that time with whatever you want. But now I think I work less than before, but by far more efficiently than before. And I think I'm by far more inspired than before. The moment he's back from daycare, like at 4 or something, we just play, him and I and my wife, and we just hang out and play. And it seems like the time where you're not working actually is very helpful for the creative process of, generating ideas. Um, So now balance for me is not between the different careers I'm doing. It's actually balancing the work where I'm away from the family with and being with the family. And also if I am with the family, the fact that I have to be fully present, and I'm loving this. I'm learning this actually as I do it. Is like I don't want to hold my phone if my son and my wife are around. It's that simple. And laptops are gone, the instrument is put away, and it's a struggle, but I'm working on it.
How old is your son?
He is turning 4 in February.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
So that time of that wild youthful imagination and
unbelievable. It's simply unbelievable. And we discovered that he has perfect pitch also. So singing with him is the most like exciting thing you can do. He sings Wheels on the Bus has been a favorite of his, like maybe all other kids in this country. And but the way he sings it is really exciting. He does it like half tempo, double tempo. He does like pitch shift. He will modulate into a different key for a while, and and also the way he interacts with the world is just unbelievable. So it's a missed opportunity if you don't abandon everything and just look and learn from how they do it at that age.
I hope you're recording him
Oh, I
sometime.
absolutely am.
I would
Absolutely
love to
am.
hear the wheels on the bus.
Yesterday night, I'm staying at my parents' place, and like we were going to sleep. So he's sleeping next to me in their guest room, and there's like some kind of uh, different shadows on the wall, and we decided to write an opera, to create an opera based on what we see. So I will sing a line like, "Are you this shape? Are you that shape?" And he immediately responded by singing his lines too. So the struggle is to try to find your phone and like press record and do it, and then when the moment he realizes you're recording, he doesn't want to do it anymore. But it's so much fun.
What about your wife? Does she play? Is she from a musical background?
She is, yeah. Leal is a composer and a violinist. She's actually, we lead similar lives, really, splitting time between composition and performance. She premiered her opera at Spoleto Festival this past May, and she has a jazz quintet that she tours with, but also she's classically trained. She's from Lebanon, from Beirut, and uh, and we met actually on tour also. We always like to think like we met somewhere between Amman, Ramallah, and Bali.
That's very cool. Just one sad note. Are you both heartbroken about what's happening in
Absolutely,
Gaza and Lebanon and Syria
of
too?
course, of course, of course. I mean, this is what we've been doing basically every day. You watch the news. Layal's parents are back in Beirut, but also we have lots of friends, lots of Palestinian friends, and I mean, I'm in touch also with the cultural scene in Palestine, in Gaza, and also in Beirut. It's just heartbreaking, and also in Syria, there's like all these. It's been insane, really, and it's been insane for years. It's but this level of atrocity is just unimaginable. Actually, it's imaginable now because it's happening.
And war is just terrible for the arts and music, which is actually what we need the most to be nourished, besides the basics of shelter and safety and food and medical
Absolutely.
care.
Yeah, actually, yesterday I was thinking about this. Is you're playing music and you want to share something with the world, but then do you think like, is this the right time? And then I realized, like, if you want to be creative in a time of genocide, really, in a time of war, then one should not be apologetic. Yes, of course, maybe music and art is not as important as is not as important as a ceasefire right now. Certainly, and it's not as important as bringing, refugees and displaced people back home, or bringing justice, or. but music can inspire somebody and it can bring comfort to somebody. But also fundamentally, music is, or making music is an act of freedom that we should hold on to. At the end of the day, uh, like nobody gains anything if you like stop doing music in times of war, you know? It's nobody's gained anything from that. Actually, the opposite. You can use your music and your art to bring attention to what's happening in the world around you. Actually, it's very, very, very important. And also, I mean, everybody is devastated, but the cultural sector in all these countries have been crushed for years now, you know, not only by the war itself and by the like insane bombing of civilians, but uh, but also by economical crash after the other, by dictatorship, by tyranny, by you name it. But you know what's also inspiring, Deborah, is when you look, and in spite of all of this, if you think of what's happening between Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria, and also Iraq, and and Yemen, there are lots of creative voices that are coming out of there, and also these musics and movies and visual arts are not only about the tragedy. You see, there are great love stories, or like films about love stories, and films about daily life, and music about just the the daily life of people that is also coming from there. But yeah, it's heartbreaking, and it's an insanity what's happening, and also the silence of the world is deafening for me.
I don't understand why the US is arming Israel. It just
Yeah,
doesn't make any sense. I
yeah,
know there's strategic things, but humanity comes first.
yeah, yeah. It's just yeah, it's it's very frustrating, and yeah. But thank you for your thoughts.
I'm so sorry. I'm so
No,
sorry
no, I mean,
that all those people are suffering so much. It's
I
just
know,
a
I know.
travesty.
Yeah.
What advice did some of your best teachers give you that has stayed with you all these years?
Charles Niedek, who I studied clarinet with at Juilliard, in maybe the first lesson I had with him, he said, "I don't want you to play like me. I want you to convince me." And basically, like, don't just mimic and imitate how I'm doing. Find your own sound and stand behind it until you convince me. And I think that advice actually is instrumental when it comes to how personal making music is and should be. Um, yeah, this is one of the most important advices. Another advice was not from a music teacher, but was from one of my most important mentor, which is my dad. When we were kids, my sister and I, he got us a computer. These early computer from the early 80s, ZX Spectrum. It was 48 kilobytes memory. That's what I remember. And he told us, I think I was maybe 8, and my sister was 11. He said, "You guys should learn how to program." And we didn't understand, like, what, who, what. And he said, "In your life, you'll have to choose between being programmers or being programmed. So, and I want you to relate to the programmer in you." And and he also encouraged me to compose, also to be on the programming side of things. And that has been an incredible advice, also, of how to look at the world. Don't only follow what somebody else has done. Look inside and be the creative force. Try to create something from nothing. So that seed was deeply seeded since back then, since, like, more than 40 years ago now. And it was an advice to be on the programming side of things. And I like that.
And it's actually it relates and interweaves really nicely with your teacher's advice to find your own voice.
Absolutely.
Boy, you
Absolutely.
got two major signposts that helped you
That's right. That's right.
find your journey, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Could you please tell me about Concertino Grosso for clarinet and orchestra? And that is your composition, right?
Yes.
And you will be performing it November 9th and 10th here in Santa Fe. Can you tell me a little bit about that composition?
I will tell you actually about two pieces that I'm playing in Santa Fe. One of them is Concertino Grosso, which is the Knights Orchestra commissioned, and Colin Jacobson commissioned me to write back, I think, in 2018. And the piece is about, I mean, it's a play on words. Concertino is a little concerto. Grosso is big. So it's a little big concerto or a big little concerto. Um, and and basically I just this is one of the few pieces during that time when I was composing that was not inspired by home or by what's going on in Syria. And it was a piece where I tried to break free from the tragedy, if you want. And the piece is about celebrating the orchestra as a band. I always like this. If you study musical ensembles in a parallel way, to look at an orchestra versus a band, what are the differences? Most of the time, the difference is about the level of interaction between the musicians. So Concertino Grosso is a piece that is written for clarinet solo, violin solo, guitar solo, an orchestra, and a rhythm section, which is the bass and the drums. So it functions as a band in a way, and it allows three soloists to improvise within the context of the piece. It's in three different sections, what can be described as contrasting dances, maybe. And and the other piece on the program that I'm playing is called Wedding, which is the third movement from my suite for improviser and orchestra, where November 22nd is the middle movement. And Wedding is also a piece that tries to celebrate the orchestra as a band. And that piece is more programmatic and is inspired by the mood and the feeling one can find in a Syrian village wedding, where these kind of ceremonies are usually public. They take place in the public square. Everybody shows up, including the musicians who can play whatever they like to play. So the melodies are all original, but of that piece, but the mood we're trying to capture is what happens in the weddings in Syrian villages.
Can you tell me, please, about your prayer? Well, actually, what's it called again? Prayer for Edward Said.
Yeah, it's prayer tribute to Edward Said. Yeah.
Yeah, tell me about how you happened to write that, and I assume it means you admire this amazing man.
Oh, absolutely. I met Edward Said. I was very lucky to meet him at a later stage in his life. First time I met him at the West Eastern Divan Orchestra, which was led by him and by the famous conductor Daniel Barenboim. We met in Chicago, I think in 2001, I believe. And and then a few years later, I met him again at his home in New York. Uh, I mean, I like basically I love everything that this guy has said in every interview. And you know what an intellectual. I mean, he doesn't need me saying all of this, you know. He lived a very meaningful and strong life, and he inspired so many people, you know, whether his writings, the way he handled the position he was put into, you know, trying uh, to bring truth to power, really, when it comes to Palestine, but also to human rights at large. You know, he was not only a Palestinian; he was a Palestinian American, and he had a global view on things, which was incredibly inspiring. So when I met him, you know, on a one-on-one basis, it was very close to the end of his life. Uh, And after that meeting, I just went and I wrote the piece. Unfortunately, he was not he was not able to hear it because he passed away a few months after that. And the piece took a life on its own. And I'm so happy now to see so many people playing this piece around the world.
And that is a solo
It's a
clarinet
solo
piece.
clarinet piece. That's right.
So that is all you coming through to
It's all
him.
me. That's right. Yes, this is Prayer, tribute to Edward Said, which actually, whom I wish is still alive right now, and just to hear his words of wisdom in today's world.